Let me introduce myself. My name is Nate Kronauer. I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Maine Solar Solutions. We are a local solar company in Freeport. I'll let Nicole kind of talk about that in a bit. I just wanted to give a few general remarks. Right now, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put that in the chat box below. And then at the end, we will, when Nicole's done presenting, I'll go through and read off some of the questions, and she can answer some of them. So feel free to just hold those questions or put them right in the chat box, and we'll address them at the end. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nicole Johnson, who is the other screen that you see here. She is our off-grid sales consultant. So I appreciate her taking the time to share a lot of this really good info with you, all about going off-grid in Maine. So without further ado, Nicole, take it away.
Perfect. Can you see my screen all right? The slides, the presentation?
I can see it all right, yeah.
All right, perfect. My name is Nicole Johnson. I work in our off-grid department. I also do some of our new construction, and that kind of overlaps a little. I do see a few familiar names here, so I know I've talked to a few of you. So I'm going to cover today off-grid and our process for going off-grid. I'm going to cover it today in our discussion. I'm going to shut my camera off so we can focus. In the discussion, how off-grid systems work in Maine, how we go about designing them, kind of what is involved in living off the grid, and then how our process works and how to get started. Maine Solar as a company, I know that a lot of you have already spoken with us in some capacity, but as a company, Maine Solar has been around for 13 years, working on our 14th year. For systems that we've installed, both grid-tied and off-grid, we've installed all throughout the state, 3,500. We do have a few installs, I think, in New Hampshire at this point too. We have over 50 employees that work and live in the state. And then if you guys have taken any time to review our Google reviews, you'll see that we've worked really hard to maintain our 5-star reviews on there, and that speaks really highly to who we are as a company. We are a full service company, so all of the work that we perform is all done by our employees. We don't subcontract anything out. So everybody you meet along the way will live and work in our communities here. For what we do as a company, right, we do solar systems, both off-grid and grid-tied. We install battery. We have an electrical division, so MSS Electric. So we do even like new construction, full home wiring. We do EV chargers and generator installs. A lot of that overlaps with our off-grid division. So if you're building off-grid, we can, in the whole process, maintain that whole process, right? We can do the off-grid system, we can do the electrical wiring, we can do the generator install as well. Why folks will be going off-grid? That's pretty common for folks to want to be off-grid. Why people would go off-grid? Primarily when people are going off-grid, it's because they are building a home, or they have a home or camp, and the utilities don't go to their home. Either they're, on a 1-mile road that the utility pole is a mile away, or it's just not feasible because of the cost. The CMP cost to bring in lines, sometimes I speak with customers quite often where the quote just to bring in the CMP lines, it goes anywhere from $15,000-$20,000, which is kind of on the low end of some of those estimates, all the way up to $200,000-$300,000 if it's a long run from the last pole on the road. So that oftentimes will cause people to look toward an off-grid system, or just about ownership of their system, right? They want to be able to be in control of their energy and not have to worry about the grid and depend on that, the grid. We're in Maine, we lose power somewhat often, or a lot of folks do, and they want to be able to control maintaining that power. Off-grid really means, right, there's no connection to CMP or Versant. So the utility lines are not coming in at all. All of the solar or all of the energy in your home is being created by you, whether that's from solar panels, from solar panels feeding into your battery or from a generator in times when there's not enough sun to be able to supply the power that your home or camp might need. That system should and is designed to provide 100% of your electricity in your home or cabin. How off-grid solar works. This is basically a diagram of how the system components work together, right? You can think of the battery in this situation kind of being the hub that integrates with all parts of the system. The solar array panels, whether they're on the roof, ground mount, pole mount, that energy is generated and then sent into a charge controller. That charge controller controls how much energy is going into the battery. The battery discharges that energy into an inverter. The inverter changes that energy into AC energy from DC energy from the solar panels, and that feeds into your main service panel. So the energy that's going into your home to be used. There are times in Maine where your batteries might be depleted and solar energy is not generating. So that's why you'll see that generator pictured here. Most off-grid installs will have a generator in the system so that in times of low sun, the sun angle's low, that generator is there as a fail-safe because we live in Maine and there are times when the sun angle's low and we're not getting enough energy. The core components of the system, I just described a few of them, but the battery bank, again, being the hub, that is where you're going to store all of that energy for the nighttime or for times when the solar is not generating enough. The inverter, that's again the piece where the energy from the panels are being generated and turned from DC energy into AC energy for your home to use. Solar panels, obviously, those are what are generating the energy that we're using in the home. Charge controller, again, for the battery, that's going to maintain the current that's going into the battery, so you're maintaining the health of the battery. And then household loads, how are you using power? That is all the energy we're sending into that electrical panel so that you can use the power that your roof is generating. The basics of batteries. So batteries are storing the solar energy that you're generating. Battery banks are designed to hold energy for a number of days. Typically, when I'm sizing a system, I am sizing a system so that you have enough power if your solar array is not generating to get you through at least 3 days, depending on how often you're using the home or how much of a buffer you'd like. That system can be designed to go out as far as a week so that you have enough energy to use this amount of energy in your home that you use in your home to last you at least a week without the generator needing to come into the equation, or solar panel, perhaps they're covered in snow or something. So we build in a buffer into our battery design to make sure we have enough time. And battery, obviously, there are choices when you come to battery. There are, the older style lead acid batteries. You have the newer style lithium iron phosphate batteries. The older style batteries have we installed them a lot less at this point. The reason for that mostly is down to the fact that they require maintenance. Some of these batteries require you to fill water in the battery, so you're having to be involved a lot more in these systems, whereas the newer batteries are more hands-off. So the older style lead acid, at this point, we're using them really in camps or cabins that don't require a ton of energy, or if they're not heated spaces. Primarily, we're using that lithium iron phosphate battery. Those, again, don't require any maintenance. They've become very popular. The lifespan on these batteries, 10 to 15 years, perhaps longer than that. No maintenance required, and you have the ability to stack the batteries. So the batteries we're installing now, the Discover Helios batteries, it's a 15 kilowatt hour battery. You have the ability to expand that as your needs change. So if, today you only want one battery, but in 2 years you find that you want more capacity, you can stack those batteries on top of each other. A solar array, obviously one of the biggest pieces of the equation here. That solar array is designed to charge the batteries and provide the power that you need. There are a few options when we're thinking about a solar array. Primarily, that's going to be a roof mount. Put those panels on the roof, have those panels run into the home into that charge controller, into those batteries so that we can provide energy. We live in Maine, so a roof mount is not always the best option, or it's not an option because of, it can be your orientation on your roof. It could be the shading. We're a tree heavy state. So sometimes that shade alone is too much on the roof to make it a viable option, and you don't have the ability to trim trees or don't want to. So that's when we kind of pivot to a ground mount or a pole mount. A ground mount is a great option if you have a larger array. So it's a fixed system that we bring out a machine to auger screws 6 feet into the ground. And that is you can see it in the bottom right there. The panels are stacked onto that ground mount. A pole mount is the option that we would typically use if it's a little bit smaller. So if it doesn't require us to have a very large system, perhaps it's a 4, 6, 8 panel system, we'll typically go towards a pole mount. Pole mount is just one single pole. The panels fix on top of that. You have the ability to change the tilt of that so you can adjust seasonally for sun angle if you want. The ground and the pole mount typically are going to be a little bit more expensive than a roof mount if you already have that built-in racking. But a ground mount and a pole mount is a great option to be able to utilize if you have heavy tree cover and the roof is not a viable option. One of the biggest things off-grid is understanding how you use power. So part of our process is designed to have a conversation about what you're going to be doing in the house, how you use power, what appliances you're going to have, and try to get down to, what off-grid can and can't do. Some of the typical daily loads that you have in your home that are fine running on an off-grid system, LED lighting, refrigeration, electronics. Most of the time there's a well pump. Some of the high load items that we try to avoid putting in an off-grid home. A typical dryer, a typical oven, they do make propane dryers and propane ovens. So we would tend to steer people in that direction. And then any sort of electric heat. We'll go over heating in another slide. But typically there are other options, and we encourage folks when they're going off-grid to make good choices about what is going to be, easier to run in a home. Obviously, there are occasional loads, things that you're going to use that you're not using all day, every day. And that's part of the conversation that we have about living off-grid, right? What is it that you're going to be using in the home? This slide shows you a little bit of how we calculate what your daily load is. So part of that initial conversation, again, is figuring out how much energy you're going to be using in this home. Just some rough examples of different loads that we might be calculating. Obviously, lighting. Are you charging cell phones, computers? Do you have the internet? Do you have a refrigerator? What kind of appliances are you running? Stuff like that. Those are important to account for when we're sizing a solar array. Electric heat is a big kind of question in our off-grid process. In the state of Maine, we have seen a huge uptake of heat pumps being installed. So a lot of times people will come into the conversation wanting to install a heat pump. Heat pump is a difficult item to run off-grid. It can be done, but the amount of battery storage that you would need to install in order to account for a heat pump is large enough where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for most folks. So part of, a big part of living off-grid is figuring out what kind of heat is going to make the most sense for you in your home. There are a lot of great options. Passive solar is going to be one of the best. Let the sun heat that house. But propane, wood, a pellet stove, those are all going to be low demand items. Propane, obviously, you can do like a radiant floor. Wood stove, of course, pellet stove, that's just going to be a fan circulator or like forced hot air. Those are all great options for heating a home and being off-grid, excuse me, because any sort of electric heat is going to use a ton of energy and we would need a lot of battery. Obviously, when we're talking about heating, we're thinking about in the colder months, right? The winter, we have, lower sun angles, shorter days. So our solar generation in those months where we need heat is going to be lower. So we want to make sure that we are accounting for any sort of heat load and making sure we have enough battery to support that. If we don't have enough battery to support that, that's when the generator that we had seen on another slide is put into the equation, right? In the winter months, if we're not generating enough in the solar array, you're using more energy, that's when the generator would come in and recharge those batteries. I'm going to talk a little bit about our process. Our process really starts with a conversation. So that consultation is the first part in our process. We will meet. Usually that conversation starts on the phone, but we do have folks that come into the office. We'll talk about your goals for the home. What is your use of the property? So a lot of off-grid people, they're going to be using the home seasonally. We do have folks that live off-grid and it's a full-time home. They're using it all year long, but sometimes we're looking at just seasonal use. Seasonal use is going to be a little bit easier because we're not having to contend with winter. So some folks will shut down that solar array in the winter time, and then we're only using that off-grid system for the other 3 seasons. So that conversation is really kind of the meat of our process, where we get to learn your home and figure out how you're going to be using it. The site review, some of that happens over that first consultation. We'll talk about your site, try to figure out, if we're looking at a ground mount or if we're looking at a roof mount, talk about, where we would be siting batteries and the inverter and all of that. The system design part of that, again, is done in that first conversation. From that consultation, I will prepare preliminary proposal, just based on kind of the conversation we had, whether we're going ground mount, roof mount, pole mount, so you can get some preliminary pricing from that. Really after that, depending on what we're looking at, then we would do that site review. That site review will give us the actual details from your site. So we'll get to figure out the actual shade reading, the orientation, all of that from your site. After the site review and the system design, the next step would really be the installation. So our team comes out, installs. We do all of the permitting for all of our installs. So they would come out, install the system, really sit with the homeowner so we can teach you about the system and how to use it. There's a part of that that's really educational. And then support after the install. We do support all of our own systems. We do also provide support on systems that we did not install. So we have an off-grid service team that does come out and service all of our equipment. More on that consultation, that initial discussion, the goals, whether it's a new camp, where we are possibly reviewing your plans, talking about how you're using the home. Really, this is when we're digging into what are you actually running in the home, what kind of energy use you're looking at, whether it makes sense to run lines or if it does make sense to be off-grid. That's when we're starting to kind of make decisions about different loads in your home, whether you're doing, a propane refrigerator, or if we're doing an electric fridge. We're having all that conversation in that initial consultation. Again, talking about heat, we talk about heat a lot in the off-grid process, and then really more about like living in Maine and being off-grid. It's kind of a way of life. A lot of folks, once they go off-grid, they really enjoy it, and they really get into how they use energy and like to monitor that system a lot. So from that consultation, usually after that conversation, I will prepare that proposal that gives you a couple different options based on what we chatted about. So usually in those options, there's like a system that is going to provide what you need, a system with a little bit of room to grow, and then really kind of a stretch system that's probably a little bigger than you need, but lets you have that room to have extra space. A lot of the times people will come in to the conversation with a budget and they'll share that, and we work really hard to be able to provide a system that meets that budget. We do install on new construction a lot, but a lot of the times people are coming in to our process with maybe a camp that's been, run just off a generator, or and they're looking to kind of use it more and get an off-grid system in there. So we do install on pre-existing structures as well as new construction. In the conversation, again, we kind of talk through where that equipment is going to be located, ground mount, roof mount. Is there a utility closet? Where are we going to be putting the different pieces of the system? We do install generators. So if we're going to do that portion, we connect you with Maine Solar Electric so that we can get you pricing and then kind of flesh out where all of those components are going. Return on investment is a big question with solar. So we've prepared kind of an example on how you figure out the return on investment. This here is going to show you kind of the cost comparison towards running those lines and paying CMP bills for 30 years versus going off grid and how much you would save. Just kind of a rough apples to apples, but bringing in CMP lines, we've put here $15,000, average CMP bill $111 a month. After the first year, CMP costing $1,300, 10 years, $18,000, and 30 years, $74,000. Going off grid, obviously that initial investment, this comparison is an 8-panel system, kind of a average system for off grid, 1 battery, roof mounted. After the first year, you're still kind of recouping those costs at $21,000. 10 years, you're looking at around $4,500, and then after 30 years, that's kind of the big piece. You'll have saved $51,000 having not paid into the utility. So the return on investment is pretty huge for an off-grid system if you can, if you can do an off-grid system. Oftentimes, some folks, the reason they have solar panels and they're grid tied is because their energy use is just going to be too high, where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to be off-grid. How we support you, there's always somebody there to answer the phone, right? Whether you're getting me or Natasha on our team, Pauline and Erico, when you call the main line support, there's Phil on our team. He is going to be the one going out to the site. He'll be the one on install day teaching you how to use the system. We handle all of that process from the initial call that you make down to any service you need, permitting, all of that. Our off-grid installs have a 1-year workmanship warranty, but after that 1 year, we'll still service your system. We set up monitoring, so you have the ability to monitor your system. We'll train you how to use it. We'll check in seasonally if you need it. Oftentimes people know how to run their systems, and if they're living there full-time, they don't require that check-in. Again, we've been in business in Maine installing solar arrays for 13 years now. I touched on this a little bit, but living off-grid is kind of a way of life. A lot of our customers, they really enjoy being off-grid. They want to talk about it. They want to, pay attention to how they're using energy. They're tracking their energy use. They're working to get their energy use down. So living off-grid, you're kind of paying a lot more attention to that. You want to make sure that the batteries have capacity, that the solar array is working, that you have the generator ready if you need to use it in the winter. Most of our systems are designed to expand, whether that's adding a few more panels if you're using more energy, or adding a few more batteries if you want more of that buffer, or if you're using, if you decide to open the camp up in the winter and you want more of a buffer in the winter, you can add battery as you need to. Being off-grid and living off-grid means that you're not kind of at the whim of the utility, right? You're not having to pay attention to all of the rate increases. You're independent completely from the grid. There's a much lower lifetime cost for solar than if you're just maintaining a generator, right? Some people are off-grid and they only use a generator. The cost to do that is quite expensive. You have the initial cost, you have continuing propane, you have continuing maintenance. So the cost to use a generator over time is much more expensive than an off-grid system. some of the frequently asked questions, right? A lot of people come into an off-grid conversation and they don't know a ton about being off-grid. So, a lot of the main questions is, how long do panels last? Most of the panels we're installing are warranted for production for 25 or 30 years. So they're going to last a long time. What about orientation? So do you have a south-facing roof? If not, we can do like east-west oriented panels. So that's kind of a big one. Can I do off-grid if I don't have a south-facing roof? Snow, cleaning snow off panels, we recommend not to. But that's like a big question. Solar panels will shed the snow. Roof replacement, we always suggest replacing a roof. If there's any question, replacing it before an install is put on the roof there. We talked about shading a little bit. If you have the ability to remove trees and we're looking at a roof mounted array, financing options, right there. We do have a financing option for off-grid systems. We talked about expandability. How long does an install take? Typically an install is going to take a day or two, right? Most off-grid systems are relatively small. So they only take a day or two to get installed. We do service and upgrade systems that we didn't install. We talked about monitoring, and then ballpark system costs. Our average off-grid install for a year-round home, we're looking at around $25,000. But those are kind of the most frequent asked questions that people come into the process with. And now I will hand it back to Nate for any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole. That was a great presentation, and we got some really good questions in here. So I'll just start from the top order of how they were received. The first question is, how tough is it to convert a grid-tied system to an off-grid system?
I would say that it really depends on how much energy use that you're using in your home. If you have pretty high energy use, it's a little more difficult, and maybe not difficult is not the right answer. It's just more expensive, right? If you're using 15, 20 kilowatts a day, the amount of battery that would be required is high, where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it can be difficult. If you're really using a small amount of energy, it can be pretty easy.
Excellent. Yeah. The next question is, are you able to use an electric car for vehicle-to-home battery and quick charge at stalls in unusual situations?
So that is kind of a newer to off-grid. I think we have one customer that has an EV that is trickle charging it. There's not a good solution for that yet.
Yeah, because I know the electric cars can have sort of a higher consumption rate. And yeah, I know that there's like the Ford.
Yeah, they have super large batteries, right? I mean, you think of a typical Tesla, you're looking at 80 kilowatt hours of battery. Some of these trucks that are coming out now are over 100. That's a very large capacity. The vehicle to load function, I don't know that there's a solution for how to use that off grid. They're still working on how to do that well grid tied.
Excellent. I'm going to read this next question in full. We used to live in Maine full-time, but now we are only going to be in Maine from June to October and possibly a few times in other months. Is it difficult to shut the system down for the months we are gone? We'll start with that. There's a second part.
Yeah, it's not difficult, right? Most of the systems that we're installing, the batteries have something called hibernation mode. So we would shut them down in the months where the system's not being used. If there's a solar array and batteries and you're shutting down most of the house, there's usually not a reason to shut it down. But if it's an unheated space and you're not going to be there for months, you could absolutely put a system into hibernation mode. And part of our process, right, is training you how to use that and how to be able to do that on your own.
Excellent. And the second part to that question is, can you install solar panels onto a metal roof?
We do install on many different types of roofing. Typically, it's going to be an asphalt shingle roof, a standing seam metal, a screw down metal. Those are kind of the three main roofing materials that we're installing on.
And there's one third part to that. Is CMP still required to buy the excess electricity if we stay tied to the grid? And if so, how much do they pay per kilowatt hour?
So it's not, they don't pay for it in the way that you're getting money back from CMP. The net metering process awards you a kilowatt hour credit for each kilowatt that you're sending back into the grid. Net metering is still in place, and that you do get credited for each credit that each kilowatt that you send back into the grid. But there's not a monetary value.
The next question is, what is the lifespan of the panels, and do they lose efficiency as they age?
Yeah, great question. Most of these panels that we're installing at this point are warranted for production for 25 to 30 years. So they're expected to last at least that long. All panels degrade over time. Some panels degrade a little bit more slowly than others, but most of the panels we're installing are at the end of the 25, 30 years still at 85, 90% of their original production.
The next question is, are the panels made in the US or China?
There are all over the place. We have panels that are made in the US. I don't know that we have any panels or have any time in the recent past that are manufactured in China, but we certainly do have panels that are manufactured in Malaysia, Vietnam, other countries throughout the world. But we do have US made panels.
And the last question in there for right now is, I didn't notice the credits for solar power in the estimated costs. Are there any grants or rebates available to people interested in going off grid? That's a good question.
It is a good question, and I wish I had a good answer to it, but there's not currently any rebate program or incentive to go off grid at either the federal or the state level.
Excellent. Oh, there's another one in there. Recently, they have come out with roof shingles that are solar. Is this something that your company is looking into?
Yeah, we've kind of always kept our eye on new solar panels or innovations that are coming in the clean energy world. Up to now, there hasn't been a shingle or alternative that the cost per watt is low enough to make it make sense for folks. So the production on those roof shingles is so low that it doesn't replace the solar panel well. So up to now, we've not considered installing them.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole, for those answers. If there's any last minute questions that people have, feel free to put those in the chat. Nicole, if you don't mind just going to the next slide with some of your info, just in case any attendees today were looking to reach out or get in contact with you. You'll find Nicole's contact information right there. Of course, you can find it on Maine Solar Solutions website as well. And simply you can go to the off-grid tab. We have a lot of really good info that Nicole covered in, but it's good to have it right on the web page to reference as well. I think there might be some more questions. I see somebody joined a little bit late to see the first part of the presentation. We're going to skip that just for this second, and we'll go to the next question, and then maybe we can go revisit like the first couple slides quickly. Sure. So somebody has a Tesla Powerwall. Are there alternative battery options?
Yeah, so the Tesla Powerwall is not, we don't install it for off-grid. It's not a fit for off-grid. So the battery that we're installing at this point is the Discover Helios. Their newest addition is the Helios. So we've been installing the Discover batteries for a number of years. Helios is a lithium iron phosphate battery, 15 kilowatts per battery. The size of those batteries has increased and the price has fallen. So it's become a really popular option.
Excellent. And for those who might have joined late, we are recording this. And so we will, if you registered for this, we will send some follow-up information with a link to the recording of this. So my apologies if you did miss the first section there. I'm seeing another question. Oh, somebody said, you installed our pole-mounted array. Can the brackets be expanded to add more panels?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I can certainly check and get back to you. I see your name there, Jim. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think that we can. Typically, the pole mount is sized just for the number of panels. It could be that pole was maybe designed to be able to add more panels. So we'll have to look into your specific pole mount.
Excellent. So I think that is the last question that I'm seeing. Basically, if you do have a question that you think of later or didn't have the opportunity to ask today, of course, reach out to our info line or directly to Nicole to help get those answers. I'd like to say thank you again very much for everybody who has attended. It is a great opportunity to kind of show our off-grid program. It's something that we feel makes us stand out as a local company. We know there's a lot of off-grid folks in Maine, so we try to be a really good resource for that. Again, I'd like to thank Passive House Maine for holding this great series of events, and hopefully I will see more of your names on some of those webinars and presentations. So thank you very much. Thank you, Nicole, again, for giving that great presentation, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, Nate.